Ich begrüße Sie, liebe Zuhörerinnen und Zuhörer, zu unserer neuesten Meikes Raumzeit-Episode. Ich habe heute die große Ehre und Freude, mich mit Enza Iannopollo, VP und Principal Analyst bei Forrester, über AI und auch über den EU AI Act zu unterhalten. Und wir werden darüber sprechen, wie Unternehmen das Vertrauen von Kunden in ihre KI-Cases und Nutzungen gewinnen können und aufbauen können. Da Enza englischsprachig ist, wird dieser Podcast jetzt auch auf Englisch geführt. We're going to be talking about building customer trust in AI.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So my first question is actually, how has AI changed the way you companies communicate with customers? That's the first understanding, actually.
That's a very interesting question, how it has changed. I mean, the efforts that every company is doing is to make sure that they are fine-tuning and training the chatbots that they are using, if that is the tool they are using, to be as close as possible to the style of the company, to the communication style of the company, for the customer not to feel that they are talking to a robot as such. Let's just mention at the very beginning of this that empathy, that emotional connection with customers is a driver of trust. And we have seen that across different verticals, types of interactions, markets. Empathy is very important. And language has a lot to do with that empathetic connection. So I think the companies are making an effort to try and make sure that the AI that they are using with customer is as close as possible to the company style of communication, the language. But really, I think the most important piece here is make sure that you really think through empathy and how empathy is coming through the language and that communication.
Yeah. So the next question would have been actually on what you said, following up, is why do you need to build customer trust in AI? Isn't the trust in company enough as such?
That's an amazing question, because when we talk about trust, the perception of customers around trust changes with reference to risk, right?
Yeah.
When there is a high risk situation, customers are going to be much more conservative in the way they are shaping up trust expectations.
Yeah.
When the risk is low, they might be much more lenient in the way they shape those trust expectations. And so risk plays a very important role in determining how much trust I have for the company. And so AI is a component that, depending on use cases, can increase that perception of risk. And so this is fundamentally changing how customers trust company if that company is using AI. Now, our survey says that a very small percent of customers, around 30% here in the UK, say that they trust company, they use AI with their customers.
Oh.
Only one in three.
Yeah.
And so I think companies have to take that into account. Just saying, I'm going to go AI first, doesn't mean that your users, your customers are going to follow you because they followed you before. Very different scenario, very different assumptions in customers' minds. So AI is changing a lot of that trust dynamic.
Yeah. In your point of view, what's the main reason why you said now UK, but as well in Europe? I'm taking.
Yep.
I think it's not that far off the number there.
Yeah.
Don't trust an AI. See it as a risk, as you just explained. How come?
I think there are a number of components. There are some situations, some use cases are risky in their very nature. Think about asking a bank to give you a mortgage.
Yeah.
Or think about using AI to diagnose a certain disease. When I am talking to my doctor, I have a person in front of me. I can ask questions. I can, have that emotional connection. And in the case that doctor makes a mistake, I know that there is a system that is there to protect me, and there is redress for me if a mistake is made.
Okay.
Now you are dealing with AI. So that kind of human to human, of course, we are talking into, introducing AI more and more. So to the point that AI making the, diagnosis, for example. as a customer, you start saying, well, and if I have questions, who is going to explain this to me? And if a mistake is made, who is going to be responsible and liable for that? Where is my redress? So AI introduces a lot of questions in customers' mind that are really difficult to answer for them. Yeah. And also, how do I trust that AI is making the right decision in the very first place? Yeah. How do I make sure that, I am comfortable relying on what you are telling me if you are an AI and I just do not know what's inside you, how you, AI, have chatbots, how you are making those decisions. And so there is a real problem in trusting AI because of all of these elements.
Yeah. So it's not just starting to build use cases with AI, but companies need to build a whole system around it as well in order to reduce risk, to come up with legal setups and all that.
There is plenty. There is, of course, security and privacy considerations when you do that. There is now the legal liability aspect. Yes. There is a general call for accountability for companies. And this is so interesting because our data shows very clearly that even when the risk is low, when you are using AI for low risk use cases, customers are still expecting companies to be accountable. Yeah. Company to be able to explain that decision that are made, to explain that there are parameters to ensure that the decision is made in a certain way. I was talking about, there are some companies that have been very bold about the AI plans, but they didn't think about where is accountability in this, where is ethics in this, where is empathy in this. And customer says, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to use your AI first product because I need more than just a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings me to the point that we have all these privacy and consent questions and banners around it. Do you see that companies can use or turn this into actually building trust instead of actually as customers often would see it as it's annoying, it's a burden, it's actually nothing you want, or you kind of deny, or you kind of even more kind of play within the risk factor, you don't trust it here or then. How do you kind of see that? Well, advise companies to be able to have banners and consent?
I think there is a very clear demand from customers to know when they are exposed to AI and to know where their data is used for AI and why that data is used, how it is used. So I think there is a very certain point is we will have to make sure that not only we tell customers that we want to use their data with AI, but also we do it in a way that the customer understands. That's the other thing, right? So that is the challenge, making sure you are telling them, you are asking for permission if you need to, in a way that they can understand. Yeah. And this is my big call to customer experience professionals, CI professional, marketing professional, lawyers and technologists to do a very good job at making sure that safeguards are in place that align to their own vision and their own needs. But when it comes really to building a strategy that meets the customer where the customer is in terms of understanding, in terms of is the right time to ask, or it's too early, it's too late, is the language clear, is this building on some of the values that we have in our own companies? Those things I believe that CX, marketing, digital professionals can really do a good job teaching the rest of the organizations of the importance of that. If you do this thing right, if you are transparent, if you communicate in a way that makes a customer feel that you are genuinely there to help them make the choice that they feel more comfortable with. Yeah. I think there is an opportunity to build trust. If you just do the checkboxing exercise, okay, let me show you these 10 banners right at the beginning of an experience, and we know it's wrong. Cognitive load at the beginning of an experience kills the customer. Yeah. And so if you just go by the checklist exercise, I'll do just because I have to do it. We are not going to move anywhere forward on trust. And I would challenge also companies that think that they are compliant even doing that. We have a few references from some of the regulators that actually say if your customer is not able to understand what you're saying, then we question that you are even compliant with the rules.
Yeah.
So
yeah. We heard before as well that the keynote that kind of leveraging the data in order to have a personalized kind of experience as well is valuable. How can actually maybe this personalized consent or kind of feature or improve the experience and with it the trust maybe building?
Yes, there are a few things that we have learned over time. Some of them are very intuitive. Have always the same look and feel of your brand in your privacy messages, your privacy pages, your consent notices, making sure that that is very much part of the experience. Look and feel, the type of tone that you use. The other thing that is very important, make the message relevant to the customer. And what it means is, if you know that the customer is interested in certain things of your brand, for example, or bought some things before, rather than send, or if the customer shared that extra data points, then now it's going to tell you that customer is looking for these particular things, or the customer is more likely to be interested in this other thing.
Yeah.
When you approach them and we try, hey, would you like to give us your data so that we can send you more offers? Well, if you know what the customer is interested into, you should be able to say, if you give me your data, here is offers on that specific product you're interested, on that specific service you're interested. What we hear a lot from customers is that company ask and collect that extra data point and they never use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's a combination of you really make the most of the data that you have and bring that into the consent experience as well. If you're doing that, if you're sending them marketing emails, try to understand what is the last thing that they told me, what is their favorite color, what is the life event that they are going through. There are a lot of things companies know about customers and they fail to act on that knowledge. And so that may be a good point. And finally, the value exchange. I always say that customers understand if you're asking me for data, you are going to do something with that data. Probably you will derive value from that data.
Yeah.
What's in for me as a customer?
Yes.
And so it was interesting. We heard on the main stage the idea of, as a bank, we heard from their digital chief digital officer. The bank decided to offer a new service to their customers, which was an easy way to terminate subscription. You know that you have subscription for music, for a number of different things that you do. And so the bank understood customers really struggle to terminate the subscription. The process is not always easy. So the bank offered an opportunity to do that for their customers if they wanted to. In doing that, the bank asked for consent to use transactional data of customers. That was a way of thinking about a value exchange. I'll give you this service, I'll terminate those subscriptions for you, but I need to look into your transactional data. And are you happy for me to do so? Can I use that data for improving other services? And they said that there was an incredible uptake of customers using the service and giving consent for the transactional data. Just many ways to think about value exchange. Discounts, loyalty points, VIP experiences. Think of those value exchanges that make sense for the brand, but offer a specific value exchange if you're asking for data.
Yeah. I would like to go one step back, actually.
Yeah.
We talked about the AI strategy, and when you think about it as a company, who would you suggest sits at the table and who needs to be there for the company in order to kind of have let's say, a general overall consent for the AI strategy for company's perspective and the customer?
Yeah, so we have seen companies putting together these multidisciplinary teams. Sometimes they are called AI committees or task force. I mean, the name is not really important, but the idea is to have this multifunctional team put together. We see a lot of IT, legal teams be part of those committees, but also, of course, data science, security, privacy is there. And these are all functions that you need, right, to build really, those need to put together the building block of the strategy from a technical perspective, legal perspective, the data. security, privacy, all of those components. But then you need business units to be part of that, because you have to go through different use cases. And this is something that many companies are doing, making sure that the use cases resonate with this particular, business unit. Very often, business units are bringing the use case to the committees because there is a discontinuous experimentations happening. And then I have this big call for a CX, CI, especially if you are thinking about use cases that have a lot to do with empathy. They really need to build that empathetic connection. We know that fake data that is used to train the model doesn't really serve that purpose. We have a clear difference between the emotional response of some of these chatbots, which is, the chatbot understands you're sad, so it's gonna just make it even sadder. The response is gonna just mirror the emotion that they just learned from the person. We also know that in some cases, if they understand there is a woman prompting the chatbot will hyper respond, and this is clear bias ratio. So the point is the data. That the emotional response is very different from the cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is an understanding emotions and making sure that you're responding, offering solutions, offering reasoning around it. And so this is what we want, is a cognitive response, a cognitive empathy. And we need genuine data from customer interaction. We need genuine, really emotions to be put in, so data collection and curation. And all the parts around the human in the loop to make sure that the chatbot is behaving properly, that the AI is behaving properly. You need there the people that really have a handle on those interactions, on those emotions, on those connections. And this has to do a lot with the CX, CI, marketing professionals. And so they need to be at that table to make sure that the company is building something that really resonates with customers.
Yeah. I would like to bring the EU AI Act within the conversation. How do you see, or if so, actually, how this might impact companies designing the communication and the AI usage?
So first of all, I think it's very important that companies are aware of the specific risks connected to use cases that they are developing, and that is really the starting point. And I think that regardless of the EU AI Act, I think it's very important for companies to have an understanding of the risks connected to the use cases. Now, if you are in those categories of very high risk, again, because maybe it has to do with critical infrastructure, because maybe the product that you're developing is going to use AI as a security component of a product that already is undergoing some very specific procedure for, according to European legislation, for security reason, for safety reason. All those products, all those use cases will need really to be looked at in details, making sure that the risks are understood. There is a lot of compliance that will have to go into those. For the rest, and which I think is most companies what they're going to do, there are minimal risk use cases or limited risk use cases. This is all very good, trustworthy AI practices. Transparency has to be there. Security, privacy has to be there. Making sure that you are not infringing any kind of customer protection legislation or employee protection legislation that exists. I mean, this is not necessarily a new science. This is taking all the foundations that we know are important when we do business, when we build solutions and products for customers, and just applying them in the context of AI. It is more challenging because the technology can be more challenging in some ways, but it's important that we do that. It's important that we understand the models that are underpinning those tools, and we have to ask the hard question to the models providers. If you have used copyrighted sources, well, we need really to talk about that because that may be infringing legislation. We need to understand how the model is performing. We need to understand if the model was checked for ethical issues or bias, because if I bring a model that now has these biases ingrained in the model, that is going to be a big issue for me as an organization. And so all those checks needs to happen. So I wrote a report recently around using at least parts of the EU AI Act as a starting point to a trustworthy AI journey. And I think this is really the value now, is taking that as a guidance for making sure that we are trying to really follow some of the good practices around responsible AI, trustworthy AI. And frankly, these are the foundations of doing business and tech, and they have been for a very long time.
Yeah. Can you point out maybe one of the things in your report that you mentioned within the EU AI Act that now sees or AI leaders within companies should pay attention to?
I would say there is a big discussions around transparency. We have data suggesting that over 60% of consumers in the UK and the EU are saying we want to know when we are exposed to AI. All the regulations in Europe, there is a new one in Japan. There are still a couple in California that are to with AI. There is the Colorado legislation. All of this legislation is really pointing at transparency. You need to tell people when you're using AI. With them. And so I think, and there is also a big discussion with a lot of the chief ethics officers and privacy people around what's the right level of transparency. So I would say focus on that. It's not as obvious as you might think. And there is a technical detail, there is a governance detail, there is the communication to customers. So thinking about transparency and really deeply about what it means and how it's going to manifest, it is one that I would say, wherever you are, regardless of what you do, that is a very important element. Think about, as we said, security and privacy. It's fundamental. Data privacy is something that not only regulators care about, and despite what is going to happen with the specific GDPR changes that are in the works, European consumers have an expectations that companies have to be responsible for their personal data, to be, if anything else, honest around the use of that personal data. And that is not going to go away. And so privacy is part of that. It must be part of this kind of projects. And then think about risk in a way that maybe is different than we did in the past. There are some very specific elements here of bias, discrimination, unfairness, that needs to be assessed and need to be mitigated. We don't have a perfect risk assessments for this kind of things yet. And so it's really about working with the organization as a whole to really understand what is the way we frame fairness, what is the frame we understand bias, and how do we assess for those risks. And finally, to the European, to European leaders, we have to remember Europe. We speak different languages. We have very different cultures, and so I'm starting to see a lot of models that take into account this kind of different language in the way the model is trained. So you have models that are not trained just in English, but they are trained in Italian, in Spanish, in German. That's important because language clearly includes a lot of those shades of cultural differences, emotions, expectations. So this is something that certainly in Europe we need to account for. And also when you think about benchmarks for bias and fairness, you want to make sure that if you can, you start thinking through that kind of multicultural elements that we need to account for here in Europe.
In your personal opinion, is that those legal governmental laws, let's say regulations, guidelines like the EU AI Act, are those the fundamentals for actually building that trust at the end in AI, or is that within the companies, Eddie?
They can, if companies do that in a way that delivers that outcome. So if you're a company and you're saying, oh, the EU AI Act, and its regulation is new and AI is very complicated, so I do expect that we are going to see a number of probably changes moving forward. And there are a lot of things that will be imperfect because it's a very, very challenging thing to do, to write rules for AI. So let's just agree on the fact that there is no perfect set of rules. I mean, clearly all the opposite probably. Now, if an organization does that in a way, they say, okay, I need to understand the data that I'm inputting into these models, and if a customer asks to be forgotten, or if I need to make changes, I need to have data governance in place so that I can actually go and kind of do some lineage. I can try and understand where the data met the model, met the system in the very first place, and how can manage that. So I have seen companies building a very strong governance layer into their projects because they felt that they had to somehow govern that data, very often unstructured data, that was going to then be vectorized and then used for the projects that we're doing. There are companies that are creating policies to help employees write prompts that don't only kind of optimize the use of the tool, but also avoid sharing confidential data of the company that is not supposed to be used that way. So there are a lot of things that following the EU AI Act companies can do to substantially improve the way they are working with AI. It's not going to be easy. It means making some changes sometimes to even the technological choices or the architectural choices that you have made. On the other hand, if you're a company that is just going through, as I said before, minimum effort, minimum cost, that's just this checklist, and you just try to do it after you've done everything else and say, oh, we have to do this compliance, then it's really, there is very little value in doing that. It's going to be a horrible exercise to do. So my big call is making sure that organizations build compliance and ethics in the way they are developing AI as one of the foundational pillars of that work. If you try to build it on top of it after you have done everything, it's going to be very, very difficult to do, and the value that you are going to derive from it is going to be minimal. So it depends how you do it, fundamentally.
Yeah, but is that a way that at the end governments and companies work together in building those regulations, guidelines? How do you say whatever, or how do you see kind of as the future of building that trust?
This is a difficult question to answer. I would say in an ideal world, for sure, we would have government and companies working together, I think, to a certain extent. There is always an effort in that sense. A lot of the I know a lot of companies that have a government relation and government affair team try to work with governments and regulators to really bring a sort of reality check and more practical views in what those rules are. But we also know that very often it's just a very hard balancing act between different interests.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be a very difficult thing to do at times. I always remember that when the GDPR finally went through the process of being approved, that the GDPR was the most lobbied against piece of regulation that ever crossed the EU Parliament. So, working together and having a dialogue is always a good thing, but be able to manage those very different interests might be a real challenge. So, I don't know. In other parts of the world, we are seeing that there is so much more alignment between governments and tech that we have seen before. And I'm not sure that is also what we want, what we need, or is going to be useful. So I think that the best we can wish for is a fair effort in balancing those different interests, putting customers and citizens first.
Yeah. Actually, with that, I would like to close the podcast, and was a perfect wrap-up sentence at the end. Thank you very much, Enza, for your insights, for sharing your perspective and your knowledge with us and the expertise.
Thank you. It was my pleasure being here, and thank you for your time.